Joining us now for the interview is Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, it's really nice to see you again. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's a busy time for you.
Good to be with you, Rachel.
Let me start right in on the other big news story that has not about your race for the president right now, which is about the Supreme Court. What do you think of President Obama's nomination of Judge Merrick Garland for that vacancy?
Well, probably not the most progressive pick that he could have made, but I will strongly support the president's selection of Judge Garland. The idea that the president should not be able to make a nomination is totally absurd. Republican obstructionism just tells us what's been going on for the last 7 years. I will do everything I can to see that there is hearings, that a vote takes place, and that Garland becomes seated on the Supreme Court.
One of the things that has been, I think, one of the most compelling storylines and evolving things we've learned about President Obama over the time he's been in office is to watch how he has responded to Republican obstructionism. Whether he has, continued to expect them to cave, whether he has been optimistic, whether he has become pessimistic about these things. I don't know where you are on that score. Do you actually think the Republicans on an issue like this will eventually cave, that they'll eventually do the right thing? Or is there no chance that Garland will get a hearing?
Rachel, it's hard to say, but this is what I do believe. I think the vast majority of the American people, certainly Democrats, most independents, and a number of Republicans, do not believe that it is appropriate for the Republicans to act in an obstructionist way when the Constitution is 100% clear. The President of the United States has the right to nominate someone to be a justice of the Supreme Court. Senate's function is to hold hearings and to vote. I think the Republicans will pay a very heavy political price if they continue to obstruct on this issue. I think you could go forward with a strong candidate and play it out.
If you get the Democratic nomination and you were elected president in November, would you ask President Obama to withdraw that nomination in the lame duck so you could name your own nominee?
Yes, I would. And I think I'm 100% prepared to support Judge Garland. I think he's clearly very knowledgeable and can serve ably on the Supreme Court. But between you and me, I think there are some more progressive judges out there. I have said over and over again that I do have a litmus test for a Supreme Court justice. And that litmus test is that justice must be loud and clear in telling us that he or she will vote to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. I am very worried about the future of American democracy and about the ability of billionaires to buy elections. That is my litmus test, and that's what I would insist on.
Let me ask you about something that's actually based in your fundraising theory of the case here. One of the things that has been stunning about your campaign is how many small donors you have, how people have been willing to give to you again and again and again in small amounts. You've raised so much money and have shown such fundraising prowess. Obviously, you can, no matter what happens in primaries and caucuses, you can stay in this race indefinitely. You're never going to run out of money. You are right now behind in the delegates. Because you won't have that kind of constraint on your campaign, though, I wonder if you can imagine a scenario in which you're still behind Secretary Clinton in terms of delegates, but you went all the way to the convention this summer and tried to make a case for yourself by basically persuading the superdelegates to support you instead of her. Is that something you can imagine doing?
Well, here's the scenario. Secretary Clinton has done phenomenally well in the Deep South, and she has picked up a whole lot of delegates there. We are now moving beyond the South. We're moving west, where we think the terrain favors us. West Coast is probably the most progressive region of the United States of America. We think we have a good shot, can't guarantee.
We're back with Democratic presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, thank you again.
My pleasure.
Let me ask you a question about Missouri. Missouri is the second state so far in this crazy primary process this year where it was almost imperceptibly decided. Secretary Clinton, both in Iowa and Missouri, appeared to come in ahead of you, but by a fraction of a percent, by less than 0.5%. Now, you did not appeal that or ask for a recount in Iowa, and now today you've said that you won't appeal that or ask for a recount in Missouri. Why not?
Well, first of all, in Iowa, it's not a question of a recount. In Iowa, we're going through the county process and the statewide process. So that process is underway, and the final decision in terms of national delegates has not been made. But here is the truth. The media makes a big deal about, winning Missouri or winning Illinois or winning Michigan. We won Michigan. Secretary Clinton won Illinois and won Missouri. You know what? You add them all together, there is no difference in delegates. What we're talking about, Rachel, now is the number of delegates that we need. And what we proved in Illinois and in Missouri, that what happened in Michigan was not a fluke. We have real strength in the Middle West. And we have real strength, I think, as we head west in California and Oregon and the state of Washington. The issues that are gaining us support in the Midwest, for example, is the disastrous trade policies that have cost this country millions of decent paying jobs. I'm talking about NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, and many others. And what workers in the Midwest and in fact all over this country are demanding is that we have a trade policy in which corporate America starts investing in this country and not just in China and other low-wage countries. Yes, we have got to do everything we can to support poor people around the world. But my view is you don't have to destroy the middle class of this country to do that. So I think the issues that we are talking about, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. I was in Flint, Michigan. What I heard there is literally beyond belief in terms of a crumbling infrastructure and water systems. To a lesser degree, it's happening all over America. We can create millions of jobs rebuilding water systems, roads, and bridges. We can make public colleges and universities tuition free. We can demand the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes. So I think what you're seeing in the Midwest and around this country is a desire for transformation in our political and economics and to elect a candidate who's prepared to fight for working families.
You brought up Flint there, Senator. Today there was this very dramatic hearing on Capitol Hill where Governor Rick Snyder, also the head of the EPA, Gina McCarthy, were both called before this hearing and had at times very intense and slightly surreal questioning, in my opinion. One of the things that was striking, though, is that both Governor Rick Snyder and House Republicans on that committee really spent a lot of their time blaming Flint on the EPA and saying that the EPA is the problem and that's what happened in Flint. What's your reaction to that?
That's absolutely untrue. I mean, the initial responsibility was taking local power away from the citizens of Flint, decisions being made over their heads, knowledge accruing. People knew what was going on, but forgot to tell the people of Flint whose kids were drinking poisoned water. Should the EPA have done a better job? Should they have been more out front earlier on? Yes, absolutely. But the core responsibility for that was with the state of Michigan. That is why I've asked for Governor Snyder's resignation. But Rachel, the point that I'm making here is that while Flint may be the worst example of a crumbling infrastructure, it is not the only one. We've got to think out of the box. We have to ask why in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, why our infrastructure, not just water, but wastewater, roads, bridges, why our rail system is falling behind other countries. And what I've asked for is $1 trillion investment. 13 million people go back to work rebuilding this infrastructure. Children in America should not be drinking poisoned water. End of discussion.
Senator, there were reports today in the Washington Post and more pointedly in the New York Times that didn't quote President Obama, but they described remarks he made apparently at a closed-door event on Friday in which he told donors, at least it's reported that he told donors that the Democratic Party needs to start to unite behind a nominee. And in the New York Times, there was a strong suggestion that the president indicated that he believes the nominee will be your opponent. It'll be Secretary Clinton. I know that you consider President Obama to be a friend. I just have to ask your response to that.
Well, I don't want to speculate on what he said or what he didn't say. In fact, I've heard there has been some pushback from the White House kind of indicating that he didn't say that. But the bottom line is that when only half of the American people have participated in the political process, when some of the largest states in this country, people in those states have not yet been able to voice their opinion on who should be the Democratic nominee, I think it's absurd for anybody to suggest that those people not have a right to cast a vote. I am extremely proud that in state after state we are winning the votes of working people. Overwhelmingly, we're winning young people who are the future of this country. A study just came out today, I believe. We have received more votes from people under 30 than Secretary Clinton and Donald Trump combined. Many states were winning the votes of people under 45. That is the future of America. That is the future of the Democratic Party. So to suggest that we don't fight this out to the end would be, I think, a very bad mistake. People want to become engaged in the political process by having a vigorous primary and caucus process. I think we open up the possibility of having a large voter turnout in November, and that is exactly what we need. A low voter turnout, somebody like a Trump can win. High voter turnout, the Democratic candidate will win. I think we have the issues. I think the American people are prepared to vote strongly against Trump, but we need to have a 50-state process by which the American people can, in which the American people can participate.
Senator, I know your time is limited. I just have one last question for you, and it's because you raised the issue of Donald Trump. Obviously, Mr. Trump has had an issue with violence at his events. He has blamed you. He recently blamed your supporters for showing up to his events and mounting protests that are disruptive. What advice, obviously I don't blame you, but what advice would you have for your supporters or for protesters who show up for any reason to Trump events, whether they're there to protest on your behalf or someone else's?
First of all, Rachel, as you may know, at least in my view, Donald Trump is a pathological liar. There's very little that he says that one can at face value believe to be correct. We have never, not once, urged any supporter of ours to disrupt a meeting, and I think that's kind of counterproductive. Having a respectful demonstration, a protest, is, I think, absolutely right. You got a guy here in Trump who has insulted Muslims, insulted Mexicans, insulted women, insulted the African American community, insulted veterans, and I think it is totally right for people to protest. Disrupting rallies is not my style. I would urge people not to do that.
Senator Sanders, thank you so much for your time tonight. Please come back soon. It's been too long, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right.